Hello, good afternoon, early afternoon. Welcome to our today's webinar, Europe on the Way to a Circular Economy, this time organized by the EU group of Iswa. So welcome to all my colleagues in Iswa. I'm very happy that you are joining this webinar. I think it's quite timely, somehow a restart after the summer break. So I think it's quite good to remind us what is laying ahead of us, legislation, challenges, etc. Especially if I remember right, 2 weeks ago, we passed already the day when we consumed all the available resources for this year. So over 4 months, nearly 5 months, we are spending more than we have on our accounts. And I think, as you all know, this is not very sustainable to spend more than you have. So I think the plans of the European Union to change this and to spend, if possible, less than we have in our accounts is a good way, but how to do it? So circular economy, somehow copying more the approach of nature, that the products, the waste of one species is the resources for the next one. Because even if we try to be more efficient in what we do, I think we are reaching very soon the limits as well, as the current business concept to produce more, to consume more. I think we all know that this is that we have already passed the borders for this approach. So I'm very happy that we have 3 excellent speakers that will inform us about the plans and the situation within the European Union. Silvia Eile from the European Commission, from DG Environment, the Waste Department, who has helped to prepare this new legislation, which should change the way how we deal not only with waste but with the products as well. Afterwards, we have 2 excellent speakers which are dealing with waste streams which are not so popular, which are extremely important, but which are usually not in the focus of inhabitants, politicians, healthcare waste, hazardous waste. And I'm very happy that the 2 speakers, 2 experts from Iswa, will update us on the situation of these important waste streams as well. Yeah, very few words to the European group. We are not an ordinary or a usual working group within Iswa. We are composed of two people of each working group of the scientific and technical committee of Iswa, and we should try to be the connection between the Brussels bubble and the Iswa world. Iswa world, I think most of the people within Iswa are really people from the practice, who are working on the field, who have to implement the legislation in each country, and who have to benefit or to suffer from new legislation. So we are trying within the EU group to organize the exchange from the practice to the lobbyists, to the people from the Commission, the politicians, the members of the Parliament, because I think the main reason for legislation is to help to improve the situation in the countries, in the region, in each city, and not to make our life even more complicated. So this is somehow the objective of our small group by organizing such webinars, or if COVID allows us, to organize face-to-face meetings as well. Thanks a lot. And now I'm passing to Silvia, Deputy Head of the most important waste unit, minimum for us, for the people who are dealing with packaging, for example. The upcoming legislation will keep us busy for the next 10 years, I guess. So thanks a lot. I think until I retire, you give me enough work to do, which is somehow positive as well. And we are very curious to learn about your updates. What are your next plans? Because I have the feeling that passing a very challenging legislation is just a motivation for all of you to think about what can be the next challenge on top of it. So Sylvia, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joachim, for the nice introduction. And thank you very much also for giving the opportunity to speak to this such wide audience of waste sector professionals or those who are interested in this sector. So it's a privilege. Yeah, so my presentation will be hopefully 30 minutes, if possible shorter, but a lot of it, a lot of information in it. So I will start with reflecting a little bit on the policy context, and then I will give you a quick overview of the latest changes in the waste legislation that was adopted in 2018. And then also to give you an idea of where we're going in the future. And as Joachim already alluded to that, it's a steep it's a steep climb that we will have to do. So let me see if I can change the slides. Yeah, perfect. So so to give you the overall policy context, the Commission last year adopted the European Green Deal. It's a communication of the Commission, and it is an overarching policy framework for all policies in the EU, so also including the waste policy. And the objective of this Green Deal is to achieve a climate neutral Europe by 2050, and that means that in the next few years we should be aligning all our waste policies and legislation to this to attain this objective. So including also the waste policy, and the other, so this Green Deal also emphasizes very much the role of the industry and the role of a circular economy. And we have at the beginning of this year adopted a communication on the circular economy action plan. So this is the second action plan. The first one was in 2015. And in this action plan, we list the measures that the Commission will take at EU level to bring us towards this objective of circular economy. And I mean, the underlying issue is that Europe is resource scarce, and we depend a lot on external sources. So the circular economy approach is really a necessity to get the maximum value out of our scarce resources. And this, I mean, this is applied equally to water, to land, to other resources, and including the waste and products. So the circular economy is at the heart of this new regenerative growth strategy, which is the European Green Deal. And to reduce our material footprint and to increase significantly the material use rate in the EU. And the Circular Economy Action Plan provides a future-oriented agenda to achieve this cleaner and also more competitive Europe. And it essentially calls for integrated policies. So, I mean, we're trying to follow this approach of from cradle to grave and back. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that all the actors across the whole value chain of materials and products coordinate. And it's the only way how we can maintain the value products in the economy for as long as possible. And so we had, as I mentioned, in 2015 already an action plan on circular economy, and it contained over 50 different actions, so of soft and hard measures. And one of the hard measures was the review of waste legislation, which was finally adopted in 2018, and that the member states should have transposed by July this year. And so the Circular Economy Action Plan, the old and the new, they really call for a life cycle thinking, so which involves looking at all the stages of a product's life to find out where the improvements can be made to reduce the environmental impacts and the use of resources. So the goal is to avoid that we shift the negative impacts from one stage to another. So and in terms of the waste perspective, we want to ensure that the end-of-life aspects are considered all the way upstream in the different phases upstream, and in particular in the design stage. And we have clear, there are a number of studies that show that up to 80% of the product's environmental impacts are determined at the design stage. So sound waste prevention and management of waste that are essential building blocks of the circular economy. And turning waste into this resource is a complex challenge, as you all know very much, and it does require a bit of boldness and persistence for the policymakers, for businesses, and also for citizens. And this does not happen in one day. It does require reforms. And that is why we have we're doing at EU level what we can. So where we see that we can achieve reforms better by defining EU objectives, EU targets. That is what we have proposed to do. That's what we did in the recent review, and what we'll do in the future as well. So this, I mean, you all know very much what is the waste hierarchy. So it basically outlines the principles that we want to observe, that we want to, as a priority, prevent waste, and only as a last resort dispose of it. So ideally, we would recycle and reuse materials and waste. However, this this hierarchy should not stay at the level of a guiding principle. We want to make sure that it actually happens on the ground in the way the pyramid lays it out. So what we do at the EU level, we try to put enough hard and soft rules to make sure that this does happen on the ground. And so the use of target setting for prevention or for recycling or landfilling is one of the best ways how to do, the most effective way how to do that. Then, just to give you a very short summary of the key elements of this last review of the key waste legislation. So I'm talking about the Waste Framework Directive, the Landfill Directive, and the Packaging Directive. So this was one of the biggest reviews we've had in our waste legislation since it was adopted. Because the ultimate goal of it was to really provide very ambitious long-term objectives for waste management. So with the adoption of the recycling targets for municipal waste, to packaging waste, and also targets to reduce the landfilling of waste. And yeah, as you can see, there is quite a steep progression that we're looking for, starting from 50% this year to 65 in 2035 for recycling municipal waste. Similarly, on the landfilling of waste, it is also quite an ambitious target to go from 25 on average in the EU to 10% in each member state, because some member states still have quite high recycling landfill rates, up above 50% for sure. And also very ambitious recycling targets for different packaging materials. And the targets as such, I mean, these rates that we have in the legislation, I mean, they show very clearly what is the ambition. But the ambition very often is, the devil is always in the details. So that's why, in order to really assess the impact of these new targets, one needs to look at the implementing rules, so implementing acts that define how we calculate recycling. So when we consider that something enters a recycling operation. And so there is I'm not going to go into details of that. It's just to point out that there is quite a significant change in approach. Whereas in the past it was possible to count waste that has been separately collected as recycled. Even if it is not recycled fully, then according to new rules, member states can only count waste that is actually recycled, so a waste that actually enters a recycling operation. Now, and that really adds an ambition to our waste legislation. And now, in terms of waste prevention, this was another objective for this review, is to make clear that the higher tier of the waste hierarchy also needs to be taken seriously. So there was, so the objectives that member states have to achieve for waste prevention have been strengthened, have been more detailed. And member states have to have to revise their waste prevention programs by envisaging specific measures to achieve the waste prevention objectives, lay down all the waste prevention measures that are necessary, and also to monitor the progress of these measures. Then, so these targets, they don't happen. It's not possible to achieve them, without adding a specific toolbox that helps along the way, and that is definitely the separate collection. That is the first step. You need to get it right. At the beginning of the whole process. And so the waste legislation introduces much stricter rules on how separate collection should be organized. If there are any need for a derogation for a separate collection, then it needs to be very well justified and reflected in waste management plans. Achievement of these higher targets definitely mean that the separate collection has to be increased. So in terms of the coverage, also in terms of the quality of the services, and also it needs to be extended to bio-waste. Because bio-waste for most member states makes up quite a large fraction of municipal waste. So without strong measures on separate collection of bio-waste, it's simply impossible to meet these new recycling targets. So separate collection of bio-waste is really essential, and that's why it is mandated by this new legislation. And similarly, there is a new obligation to separately collect household hazardous waste and textile waste. The construction and demolition waste stream is one of the, one of the biggest single streams out of the total waste generation, and currently there exist recovery targets for this waste stream. And in order to improve the possibility to reuse and to recycle the specific material streams of construction and demolition waste, the new legislation envisages that there should be separate selective demolition and sorting systems for the different material streams. Another very strong measure is enshrined now in the waste stream directive and in the landfill directive, stating that when a separate collection is organized for the purposes of recycling, then that waste, as a general rule, cannot be landfilled afterwards or incinerated. And in terms of guidance, the Commission is envisaging a guidance on separate on good practices in separate collection of household hazardous waste. And economic instruments are very important in order to facilitate this implementation of the waste hierarchy. So it's important to facilitate citizens to participate in sorting of waste at source. It's also an important instrument to divert waste towards recycling, away from landfilling and incineration. And one of the key instruments is also extended producer responsibility. This is a concept that is applied to quite a large number of products, and at EU level, but also at member state level individually. And one of the key changes of this waste package was to introduce minimum requirements on how these EPR schemes are organized and run to improve their governance, transparency, and cost efficiency. And in addition, there is we have envisaged in the legislation an annex providing a list of a number of measures and other economic instruments that member states are asked to consider applying. And in terms of implementation of these new rules, so as I mentioned, we have the member states had a deadline earlier this summer to transpose all these new rules. And last time I checked, there is quite a large number of member states that still have to notify their measures. So there is a delay in the transposition. And it's explained by the fact that indeed these legislative changes are quite complex, quite significant as well. They require in-depth discussions with the involved stakeholders, because this new legislation does mandate reforms. So reforms take time to discuss and to put on paper and then to negotiate them. So it is understandable that there is some delay, and also as we all are aware, the pandemic has definitely delayed these discussions due to both the administration and the businesses have been distracted by this emergency. But we are following how this is being transposed. And also, there's a number of tools that we apply at the Commission level to facilitate these changes. And in terms of some, so we have a number of dialogues, we have funding at EU level that is envisaged for the economic operators and for member states. And also a new element is enshrined in this new legislation that requires the Commission to adopt sort of we call them early warning reports, whereby we assess each member state's progress towards meeting these targets, and these reports have to be issued 3 years before these targets come into play. So the next report will be adopted in 2022 to assess the progress towards achieving the 2025 recycling targets. And I have provided some links here where you can find more information on the different tools that we have for monitoring and pinpointing this progress. Now, in terms of what the future holds for us, this is clearly defined in the Green Deal. It is then elaborated a bit more in the Circular Economy Action Plan, which was adopted in March this year. And also we have a number of review clauses in the legislation itself. This the new Circular Economy Action Plan envisages a minimum of 35 different actions that the Commission will undertake in the next 4 years. And one of the key focus of that agenda is to develop a sustainable product policy for the EU. And this is very important for the waste sector, because, as I said, the design of products, choice of materials very much impact on the cost efficiency and feasibility of good waste management. And in terms of waste, there is quite a heavy legislative agenda that's envisaged in this action plan. And I will, I think it's in the next slide, yeah. So, well, first of all, a big emphasis is put on the fact that we should really focus on waste prevention, and having general objectives, general obligations doesn't do much. So the intention is that the Commission will be doing further assessments to investigate whether we can be more prescriptive in terms of what measures we expect member states to take. Should we facilitate prevention by additional legislative measures? It could be by setting waste prevention targets for specific waste streams, or it can be strengthening other aspects of legislation. So there is this is a process that has now started in the Commission. We are reflecting on this, but the overall idea is that we do need to look at waste prevention, and we need to look at it more generally, but also in terms of specific waste streams. So when we look at the upcoming reviews of waste legislation, there will always be one policy objective to see what we can do to facilitate waste prevention. And so, yeah, we need to modernize waste legislation to bring it in line with the circular economy principles. So that essentially means that we will be reviewing almost all of our waste legislation in the coming years to see how we need to adapt it to the current state of play and the new policy objectives. I will go into more detail on that in the next slide. Just to also mention that one of the objectives that the Green Deal itself envisages is that we need to think how we can improve and harmonize separate collection in the EU. There's of course different ways how to do it. There are different national, local circumstances that need to be taken into account. But the idea is to look whether we can come up with some minimum requirements that would harmonize these processes at EU level. And this is also a process that is about to commence in the European Commission. We will have very wide stakeholder consultations involvement, and of course working very closely together with the member states, including at local level. Another sort of cross-cutting element is waste shipments. And here, the overall objective is to ensure that the EU does not export its waste challenges to third countries. And this means that we are we're in the process of revising our waste shipment regulation to see how we can strengthen its provisions, procedures to meet this objective, and which inevitably, of course, leads to considerations that we need to increase the recycling capacities at home, and therefore create the recycling secondary raw materials markets in the EU. And also look at how we can, look at how we can revise the existing procedures for shipments across the EU to facilitate really the movements of secondary raw materials. And in that sense, the Commission has also embarked on a process to identify areas, different waste streams, to where we can develop at EU level end of waste criteria to ensure that these resources are able to move freely within the EU. So as I promised, here is an overview of the different pieces of legislation that make up the EU waste policy. And I have indicated here in green all those pieces of legislation that will be reviewed in the next years. So Joachim is right; he'll be very busy. It is really almost all the legislation. It will be the first one that is up for review, and that was already indicated in the European Green Deal, is the batteries directive. So we will be proposing a review already this year. Also to regulate it really from product to the waste stage. Next year, we plan to come up with the legislative proposals to review the waste shipment regulation, which are already introduced. Also, the packaging and packaging waste directive. The objective of that review will be to review the essential requirements for packaging being placed on the market. And the goal of that review is to ensure that packaging can be either reusable or recyclable in a cost-efficient way by 2030, and also to look at ways how we can reduce packaging and packaging waste. And also in 2021, we will be proposing amendments to the annexes of the POPs regulation, setting specific rules on POPs waste. And then in the reviews will continue in 2022 with the end-of-life vehicles directive, with restrictions of use of hazardous substances in electric and electronic equipment. And at the same time, we are now starting an evaluation of the sewage sludge directive. So this is a directive from the 80s. We call it the zombie directive. It's time it is being looked at. So already this year we will be starting an evaluation to see really to identify the areas how it can be improved, how we can improve the consistency of that legislation with the new policy objectives and other new rules. And I have also indicated the review of the waste from directive and the landfill directive, and it may be confusing why it is there. So I have listed here in the next slide why we're reviewing it again if we did it in 2018. And it is because there is quite extensive review clauses in this directive. So we have an obligation to propose recovery targets for waste oils. We have an obligation to propose reduction targets for food waste. And then, as we call it, the mother of all review clauses is the one for 2024, because it essentially requires to review everything again, starting with looking at developing targets for prevention of waste, and partially this action will be advanced already due to this overall objective in the Green Deal. And also there is an extensive request to look at how, look at the feasibility of setting new targets for recycling of construction and demolition waste, so specific to the materials. To look at feasibility to set recycling targets, preparation for reuse and recycling targets for textiles waste, for commercial waste, for non-hazardous industrial waste, municipal bio-waste, and then any other stream. So it's an extremely broad review clause, which also means that we will be starting preparatory work quite early on. In fact, it has already started for some of these strands. And so for the next 3-4 years, we will be also so actively working on this 2024 review clause. So it is quite a full agenda that is on our hands, because we need to prepare reviews for the next years and negotiate it, and at the same time also prepare for this further review clauses. And the other quite extensive review clause is to do with the disposal of waste. So there is a mandate asking the Commission to assess feasibility of setting more specific rules on disposal of waste, so not only on landfilling, but other forms of disposal. And on this one, I can already tell that we have been looking into this in the past year. The Joint Research Service Center of the Commission has already carried out a study in consultation with member states. So you can consult that on the JRC website. And then, there's further review clauses for 2028, but that is still further in the future. So with this one, with this slide, I'd like to conclude my presentation, and I've included some links there that will also bring you to further information should you wish, and I'm also here to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Sylvia. So yeah, that's I think quite impressive, and that should not sound sarcastic now. So we just please don't forget that someone has to implement it one day in reality as well. No? It's not only that the member states have to do their national legislation. As a next step, people have to do it in practice. And you know how difficult it is from the municipal waste targets that have to be fulfilled this year. And legislation is 10 years old, 12 years old. So I think it will take us, all of us, a lot of efforts to make this a reality. A lot of questions already, which we will deal after the next two presentations. And I'm very happy that we have not only the usual suspects from the European countries here as people listening. I saw people from Bangladesh, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, Lebanon, Canada, Australia, Ghana, South Africa, Kenya. So thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks a lot for listening. As I said in the beginning, two experts now, starting with Nicola Umes, chair of the working group, Iswa working group Hazardous Waste, and Director Regulatory Affairs of Saab Industries. He will talk about hazardous waste and what is needed to make the objective of the Green Deal, zero pollution ambition for a toxic-free environment, a reality for hazardous waste, which I think it's quite difficult and quite challenging and not as easy as my packaging world, which is very easy, no problem to deal with the new targets and so on. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Joachim. Sorry, and as you said, hazardous waste management was not the main issue of the EU circular economy package adopted in 2018, and Sylvia exposed most of the topic on this package and what will happen next. Nevertheless, some new requirements in this package are of utmost importance and contributes as a first essential step to support meeting the objectives of the EU Green Deal, and specifically a zero pollution ambition for a toxic-free environment. But behind consistency in the communication and political will that everybody can hear about, what does it mean for the different stakeholders and for the hazardous waste sector in particular? One of the focuses regards the presence of hazardous substances and what is needed in order to favor circularity of materials from waste, yet ensuring that substances of concern are not re-entering the loop with the recycled materials. So it's the responsibility of the waste sector, and specifically of the hazardous waste sector, and it demands strong actions that could be implemented through the chemical strategy for sustainability. And chemicals and waste issues are chemicals and waste issues are discussed worldwide, but the EU is a frontrunner in this debate. The Parliament has adopted a very progressive motion for resolution last July. DG Environment seemed to be very aligned with it, but as you probably all heard or read about, at least in the European bubble, as Joachim said, there is a sort of very defensive position from the DG Grow. The aim of my presentation will be therefore to try to answer the following question. From a responsible management perspective of the hazardous waste sector, what should be the roadmap for waste and chemical strategy within the Green Deal? The global knowledge on chemical substances is like an iceberg. This is the image from the EEA. On the 100,000 chemicals on the market, around 70,000 chemicals are poorly characterized regarding hazards and exposure. Whereas, according to the European Environment Agency, even small amounts of some chemicals can endanger human health and the environment. With increasing quantities of such chemicals in the environment and improved scientific understanding of their effects on people and ecosystems, the challenge is to find the right balance between the benefit and the risk of chemicals. After this brief introduction of the context, I will explain what could be the 8 recommendations that would allow to answer my question. First of all, there is a reliable evidence and strong suspicion that many substances in circulation pose a threat to human health and the environment, far beyond the current 209 substances of very high concern that are in the annexes of the REACH legislation. The term substance of concern, already commonly used in the EU official documents, should fix the gap by covering substances already regulated in different pieces of legislation and adding new and emerging hazards as endocrine disruptors, for example, or nanomaterials, or even microplastic that may harm health and the environment, but are still not regulated per se. Therefore, the strategy should define substances of concern as those identified under REACH as substance of very high concern, substances prohibited under the Stockholm Convention or at the European level, the POP regulation, specific substances that are restricted in article listed in Annex 17 to REACH, as well as specific substances regulated under specific or sector-specific legislation, like ROS, for example. The list should be regularly updated by the European Chemical Agency, ECHA, on the basis of new available results and take into account new and emerging chemical hazards as endocrine disruptor compounds, etc. As similar substances are likely to present similar threats, legislation should favor an approach by family of substances instead of a substance-by-substance approach. A grouping approach will be more effective and efficient with regard to spend, cost, and time, whereas an assessment substance by substance is a never-ending process and would risk to perpetuate the vicious circles we are in at the moment. Therefore, the strategy should adopt a grouping approach instead of a substance-by-substance approach. Legislation can take some time, although evidence exists that chemicals risk, new or emerging, but also for suspected risk, pose a threat to health and the environment. The problem should be addressed by introducing specific hazard to address this risk, and thus considering chemical substances that are concerned by this hazard, but are not part yet as a comprehensive framework and not yet regulated. For instance, again, endocrine disruptors hazard. Then, an harmonization of new hazard with the international system at the GHS level will be needed. And this should be the role of the Europe. Chemicals are intended to cover a huge diversity of application, putting them at the interface between chemicals, product, and waste legislation. That explains the necessity to adopt a comprehensive and integrated horizontal legislation and to address chemicals throughout their whole life cycle. A specific focus should be granted to endocrine disruptors qualified by the World Health Organization in 2012 as a global threat that needs to be resolved, with a need for a definition with harmonized criteria across the different sectors of activities. Therefore, the strategy should integrate specific categories of hazards, as I already mentioned, to fill the gap of risk that are so far not properly addressed in the relevant legislation. It could be based on the same methodology as the one developed for the candidate list of the REACH regulation by associating specific substances to the created new hazard. My presentation will be populated with 4 chosen statements coming from different communications of the EU Commission, showing that the different recommendations I raised are consistent with assessment and other study already carried out. So this is the first one. I will not read it and not the others, but we have the possibility to have a look when the presentation will be circulated. So chemicals, the fourth recommendation. Chemicals are everywhere in our daily life, and it is not possible to get rid of all of them because, of course, they participate to our well-being. Nevertheless, chemicals have to be managed responsibly. The list of substances of concern, and thus legacy substances, how we call them, will steadily grow up. Consequently, it is important to keep their trace throughout their life cycle, from product to waste, to ensure they receive the most appropriate treatment, reuse, recycling, recovery, or disposal at the end of the life of the product. The future skip database that the ECA is building at the moment will be a very valuable tool to record and share information between the whole chain of actors until the waste treatment operators. It will fill the blanks and the gap of the safety datasheet of the REACH regulation. It would also be an answer to those stakeholders that struggle to get access to information, like us, and identification of substances in materials to be recycled. Although today the skip database is limited to substances of very high concern, it should be extended, in our opinion, to all substances of concern when their concentration in the products is above 0.1%. To do so, information about all hazardous substances in article should be recorded in the database to have it constantly up to date when scientific data or legislation impose new specific management of the waste, of the substance, sorry. The same requirement should also apply to imported product, of course. This contributes to anticipate potential lack of knowledge of substances contained in products, as it is currently the case with regard to legacy substances. Therefore, the strategy should ensure traceability and information all along the life cycle through action and measures that will contribute to high-quality recycling. In this regard, the forthcoming skip database will represent a good tool and a good first case study. The forthcoming strategy should be also the opportunity to ensure that mixing or blending operation cannot be used with the aim to lower the concentration of hazardous substances of a waste, because it will not lower the quantity of hazardous substances released in the environment and or in material loops. To give an example, drinking a glass of vodka, either dry or diluted with soda or ice, will get you as drunk and at the same moment as the amount of alcohol remains the same. To avoid mixing or blending, it may be necessary to separate contaminated waste from clean waste, an operation which may result in additional cost, of course. But destroying the pollutants or trying to destroy the pollutants after dilution is much more costly and even sometimes impossible. If not destroyed, the pollutants are harmful to human health and the environment. Therefore, the strategy should also encourage separation, for example, simply by sorting uphold, of contaminated stream, thanks to information and traceability that will ensure clean material cycle and avoid that substances of concern spread in the recycling loops. Only by separating streams that contain substances of concern above the threshold, it is possible to avoid contamination of the whole stream. This statement supports the next recommendation, and I will not read it. You will see, look at it later. Only strong confidence in material coming from waste is able to create a sustainable and safe secondary raw material markets at the core of the circular economy principle. With the Green Deal's ambition for a high-quality recycled material, Contamination by some unwanted chemicals automatically implies that 100% of waste input in a recycling process cannot provide 100% of recycled output if principles of non-dilution and traceability are respected. Residues and impurities have to be appropriately extracted and safely treated. The overall process, sorting, extraction, and treatment of those residues containing the unwanted chemicals is, in fact, what we call decontamination. It concerns, for instance, waste containing mercury, waste containing POPs, like the brominated flame retardant in plastic, for instance, and so many others. Recycling should not justify the perpetuation of the use of hazardous legacy substances. Same rules should apply between primary and secondary product. Keeping the contaminant in the recycled material is incompatible with a non-toxic environment. There should not be no derogation for recycled material compared to virgin material, so the same restriction and the same threshold should apply. Otherwise, it will never create trust in recycled products, and we will never get rid of them. Same rules should also apply to EU and imported products to avoid annihilating the whole effort undertaken by the EU to handle the substances of concern. Therefore, the strategy should ensure enforcement of the principle of decontamination, which is the Article 10.5 of the Directive on Waste, the new one from the Circular Economy package. And the objective is not to reach a zero contaminant, for sure, but to ensure prior to recycling or recovery that substances of concern contained in end-of-life material, product, or goods beyond the mandatory threshold or beyond the mandatory bans are extracted and disposed of in an environmentally sound way. This slide is also a statement that supports the next recommendation. Waste and chemical legislation could not be fully aligned, and classification methodology should remain separated. In the case of a product, when the scenario of exposure according to a use can be assessed, the risk-based approach is common and sufficient. But the challenges are radically different for waste, as one can never be sure of the final destination. We can never predict the exposure at the waste stage because a waste can be handled and treated in many different ways that cannot be assessed a priori. Because of this uncertainty, waste should be classified on a hazard-based approach, which only takes into consideration the intrinsic properties of the waste to ensure that it will be oriented towards the most appropriate treatment. A classification of waste based on a risk approach would fail to encompass all possible downstream routes and exposure scenarios. Therefore, the strategy should ensure that waste classification and waste management should generally be based on a hazard-based approach. Flexibility could be brought during the waste management, of course, but excluding the waste classification, but applying a risk-based approach, but only in certain cases when it comes to a closed or a controlled loop systems for allowed end uses. Finally, the strategy should guarantee that the European Chemical Agency should receive sustainable financial and human resources to ensure its functioning and efficiency in its mission, according to its value of transparency, independence, and trustworthy. Therefore, there is a need for ensuring the support to the ECHA work. Only a comprehensive horizontal approach, as Sylvia also said, across the different sectors of activity will allow the EU to reach the zero pollution ambition expressed in the EU Green Deal. Implementing ambitious measures will obviously demand all the EU stakeholders' strong efforts, but this strategy could be the turning point to emphasize that health and environment should weigh more than business consideration in our economic model. traceability of substances of concern on the whole life cycle, non-dilution, and decontamination are the pillar to reach non-toxic material cycle for a responsible management perspective of the hazardous waste sector. This is also part from the approach underlined in the study for strategy for a non-toxic environment of the 7th EAP from 2017, which is on this last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Nicolas. I think it's great that you have already a catalog, which the Commission just have to follow. Huh? So I think this is a very good start. And because of the timing, I will jump immediately now to Omar Hernandez San Francisco, member of the Healthcare Working Group, Technical Director of the Artesis Foundations. That's really great that you are with us to share the challenges for recycling healthcare waste. I think healthcare waste somehow popped into the discussion because of COVID, because we had a lot of more healthcare waste, it seems, than before, and because of an inquiry of an important company, we in packaging try to find out, or try at the moment to find out, how packaging in hospitals, doctors, and so on are dealt with in each of the member states, and it's a mess. It's really a complete mess to understand the various legislation and rules, because in some countries it is totally forbidden to collect and recycle packaging arising in these places. In other countries, you have a differentiation, whether it is a hospital, a special hospital, a doctor's office. So this is really interesting only for packaging. It is a really interesting place. So probably even more if you have the complete look to all the waste that it is arising there. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joachim. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share our insights from the Healthcare Waste Working Group of Iswa about circular economy. It's a pleasure to share the stage with these great speakers and experts on waste management. Today I will introduce a circular economy framework to the healthcare waste stream. I will give you some examples of its application and try to draw some useful conclusions. But I will start with a short introduction about healthcare waste management. Well, as you probably know, a hospital is like a small city. Well, many different types of wastes are being produced. Of course, 85% of them are non-hazardous waste and can be managed as a municipal waste normally, following the same management rules and streams. But we are going to focus today on the hazardous healthcare waste that are, well, infectious and sharp waste mainly. But also we have some specific streams like pharmaceutical waste, cytotoxic waste, chemical waste, pathological and radioactive. All of them, they have different type of hazards like biological, chemical, physical, or radioactive. I would recommend you to have a quick look on the Safe Management of Waste from Healthcare Activities document, a summary that was prepared by the WHO together with the experts on healthcare waste management from Iswa, the Iswa Working Group. Well, in terms of risk and healthcare waste management used to have a specific role on the protection of occupational and public health. That was mainly from potential infectious microorganisms, pathogens that poses a high risk for human beings. But some scientific publications started to point out that some environmental issues were so relevant that it was necessary to find alternatives to deal with this waste. A first step happened in the 90s, so 30 years ago, when we experienced a movement against the small-scale incinerators operating inside hospitals, and non-incineration technologies were developed to solve this problem. It came autoclaves, microwaves, and some chemical treatments. So we started to think about environmental impact rather than just occupational or public health. Since then, different international agencies moved to environmentally friendly solutions to deal with healthcare waste. And this is just an example. I'm pointing out here some important or relevant issues, like the document by WHO, Safe Management of Waste from Healthcare Activities, where the hierarchy of waste management was specifically established and point out this prevention, reduction, and reuse and recycling opportunities. Also, the Minamata Convention was really powerful for this mercury-free healthcare initiative in 2017. The Stockholm Convention for protecting from POPs like dioxins and furans was adopted by these international agencies. As I told you, non-incineration treatment technologies were being developed, and more recently, climate change and health mitigation initiatives are being taken into account in different hospital levels. But all these set of different initiatives are being implemented in different hospitals following these international conventions, but without an official circular economy framework. Then we can find different levels of management, healthcare waste management, depending on the willing and the capacity of each hospital. Indeed, the traditional framework of for a healthcare waste manager was a linear one. It was based on three stages. It was first one, segregation of the waste to separate different streams, as I told you, infectious from pharmaceutical, from cytotoxic, pathological waste, and radioactive. Then transportation, and finally treatment and disposal. That was the linear traditional framework for healthcare waste management. And what we are seeing nowadays is that many healthcare waste managers, they have adopted a wider perspective, and they are introducing concepts from circular economy framework, trying to influence at different level and approaching to this circular economy framework. And then we have the one of the most important aspects to drive a proper healthcare waste management, that is the sustainable procurement. A smart design of medical devices, drugs, and packaging, and of course, sustainable procurement criteria will end up in a better segregation, opportunities for recycling, reuse, and better uptake of the resources. Guidelines to promote hazardous waste reduction are important and also mandatory in some countries, but some other, they still have a gap here. So we need to try to establish common guidelines to promote this waste reduction. I give here an example on digital imaging diagnosis that have become popular in all the countries, and that it's an opportunity to reduce the chemical consumption. Also, the reusable containers are being used in many countries in Europe, and all other reusable medical devices. Waste segregation, of course, this is an important point to start a recycling pattern, if even if it's hazardous or not hazardous. Waste transportation, and that is important also for volume reduction. We need to implement measures to ensure self-sufficiency in the regions, so each region can deal with their own waste management and treatment, because nowadays many wastes are being transported into faraway regions to be treated. And this is in line with the Basel Convention. We recently published a report also together with Iswa about cytotoxic waste management in the Western Balkan countries. And that's interesting if you want to go to know more about that. And at the end, mainly one of the most important things is waste treatment. Healthcare waste treatment and disposal. I would recommend you to take a look on the last overview of technologies for the treatment of infectious and sharp waste from healthcare facilities, published again by WHO in 2019, together with the support of the technical experts from the Healthcare Waste Working Group from Iswa, where you can find guidelines to choose the better technology that fits better the condition of each hospital region, is for complying with this Stockholm Convention, Basel Convention, and other international agreements. I'm going to give you some examples about how this circular economy can be implemented in the healthcare sector. And I wanted to give 3 different examples that are at different level of readiness to be implemented in different time terms, let's say. So this is the case of reusable containers that we already know well in Spain since the 90s. We started promoting the use of 60-liter reusable container, the green one that you see here, instead of single use, by reducing the production of infectious waste at 18.75%. This is a quite important aspect of the reusable container, rather than the economic side that is also important. We can reduce the plastic consumption if we focus on reusable containers, but not just for infectious, also for sharp waste. We can take the reusable container models. Here I show the Daniels model. What do we need to do so? We need higher skills on disinfection protocols, and we need quality control on safety procedures, and proper technologies to ensure this disinfection procedures, so the container can enter again in the hospital and be useful. This is a technology or a procedure that is already in the market, has been already tested and proved, and can be implemented at in any country in Europe. So we just need to include it in the regulation. This is one step further. That is the possibility of recycling materials from infectious and sharp waste. This is quite difficult because of 2 main issues. First of all, we have a public and occupational health issue. There is a risk of the pathogen that survive the disinfection procedure, and then after the treatment, we need to check the regrowth of these pathogens, and to do so we need regulations. Here I point out the French regulation for this proposal, for this purpose, that can be implemented in any country. So how do we check if a material that has been already disinfected can be recycled? We need to make microbiological testing after 28 days in this case, and check if the growth of the bacteria are below some thresholds. Okay, But we have another issue, this recycling difficulties. We have a wide range of plastic types in the hospital, monolayers, multi-layers, flexible, hard plastics, and different compositions for different uses. So I know it's quite difficult, but we need to start trying to find solutions. I point out here a project from the Aarhus University Hospital in Denmark, directed by Susan Baker, and you can check their proposal, trying to select some sustainability criteria at the time to buy plastic bottles and other type of plastics. Then we can try to ensure recycling PP and PE plastics. That's interesting, and it's the way that I think we have to follow. Then we have the sharp waste. This is interesting because of the high content of metallic compounds, normally nickel chrome composition. There is a kind of 30% of sharp waste that is composed by these metallic components. The problem is that we have a very high risk of infection due to its puncture capacity. So we need to find safe and efficient procedures to try to recycle these materials. And then we have the new challenges that I would like to say it's a new challenge, but we already know from science some years ago. But I think we need to focus also in the future. What we are going to face in the near future is that we have to fight against these active pharmaceutical ingredients that are coming from hospital contaminating the wastewaters, and that are posing a big problem related to antibiotic resistance microorganisms. In this case, I'm here talking about cytotoxic drug in hospital wastewater. This is a project that we have been developing in the last 2 to 3 years, understanding that the people that is taking these chemotherapies, they are excreting some of the an important percentage of the active ingredients, the chemotherapy drug, still active in their excreta, and this is a genotoxic compound that some of them are not being properly treated in the wastewater treatment plants of the municipality. So they are ending up in the groundwaters. You can check the Cytotreat project, a European project that have a lot of information about this. And different solutions are being tested in the hospital levels, like advanced oxidation and other techniques to treat this waste before it reaches the sewage system, so inside the hospital. Of course, the EU is already concerned about this issue, and they are preparing guidelines, development of less harmful pharmaceuticals, indications, and of course trying to reduce wastage and the improvement of waste management of pharmaceutical, so we can avoid these pharmaceuticals in the environment. As a conclusion, I would say that to apply circular economy framework in the healthcare sector, waste management sector, we need to promote sustainable procurement at the hospital level. We need to define these criteria into the regulation, so we can play all with the same rules. We need support for innovative technologies which are safe and demonstrate to reduce environmental impact. So we need investment support for these sound technologies, and regulation that allows pilot scale testing to research new procedures and treatment technologies. And of course, we need capacity building and professional qualification strategies for healthcare workers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes. Thanks a lot, dear Omar. Very interesting and also very challenging for the future. So I think some more jobs for DG Environment to deal with in the future, I think. We have around 10 more minutes, and I want to ask some questions to our speakers. Up to now, the questions concentrated on Sylvia. I think you inspired the people a lot to think about the plans of the EU. And a question which was quite similar coming from the UK, but also I think it was from Ghana, from Africa, somehow asking, is circular economy only about setting targets for recycling, for reuse, for whatever, or are we not missing somehow the most important player in this game? Can we succeed on the way to a circular economy if we as citizens, if our inhabitants are not starting to change their behavior? If we continue to buy, take it to the extreme, 20 t-shirts a year for €1, can we succeed in a circular economy? Or do we have to understand again that it might be better to buy one for 25, but this will last for 2 or 3 years, even if it is out of fashion then, of course.
Yes, I think it's a good question. It's a question that we all need to ask ourselves: what we can do, how we can individually contribute to making the world a better place. And I mean, indeed, I think at the EU level, we have a number of measures. There is also a number of instruments that can more successfully be taken at member state level or at industry level, or by the civil society. So I think it's what is made clear in our policy documents on, in particular, the circular economy action plans, is that everybody needs to participate. Everybody needs to take a step in this direction. So we have done part of the job by introducing specific waste management related targets that would push this action to divert from disposal. If we create waste, then we manage it in a way that recovers the materials in the best possible way. And that's why now in this current policy framework, the emphasis is on prevention. We do not want that we create waste needlessly. We don't want products that break down easily, that are planned to be obsolescent in a few months or years. There's also a new directive against single-use plastics. So there is a policy thinking happening at EU level, what else we can do. And the Sustainable Product Policy Initiative, I think, is a key instrument, key policy instrument that is currently being developed, that should answer some of these questions. What I mean, as our Director General, the past Director General said that we should simply not put on the market products that cannot be reused or that don't have a long life. So, I mean, we should only put on the market sustainable products. Now, of course, the question is, what does it mean, sustainable? And this is the sort of questions that we will try to answer in when coming forward with a sustainable product policy initiative. So I advise people to have a read at of the Circular Economy Action Plan, and also if I'm not mistaken, there is already an ongoing public consultation on this initiative that can be found on the European Commission's Better Regulation website. Like, we can provide some links to you afterwards that you can consult it. So that's the simple answer to a very complicated question.
A friend from the Netherlands is asking or doubting how much harmonization we can bring in several fields, as the situation only in the EU member states are so different, comparing the north of Sweden with the Netherlands, going then to the Greek islands. Is harmonization the better way? Minimum requirements the better way? How can you deal with these differences that are still existing all over Europe?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, there is no call for harmonization. There is a waste hierarchy, and there is many different ways how to implement it. Different instruments, different planning, different infrastructure solutions. Some of us countries are not able to recycle everything at home. It is necessary to export it to other regions. So I think what matters is that there is a sound planning of waste management, and that it has a long-term perspective. Of course, it should be adapted to local circumstances, and so what I mentioned before in terms of envisaging a sort of EU harmonized model for separate collection. Of course, it has to take into account that there are different situations locally. So the aim is not to develop a one fits all system, but surely there are certain principles and best practices that can be replicated elsewhere.
Yeah. Some of the colleagues outside the EU are doubting a bit. How can you ensure that all the member states are on track? Are you able to enforce, and are you able to really punish them so that finally they do what in the end all the member states have decided to do? Well, because they are involved in the decisions as well. It's not that just the Commission that is issuing new legislation. In the end, all the member states have to approve it as well.
Yeah, indeed, that's a good message. I also always start with that. Is that the Commission didn't adopt it. The Commission is not the legislator. We only propose legislation. So the legislation we have has been adopted by the member states and by the European Parliament. So everybody knew what they're signing up for when they voted for this legislation. So. And of course, it means, I mean, it is also a message of where we want to be. We are not there, as I said at the beginning, the implementation of this legislation and also the future acts that will be negotiated will require change. It will require reforms. That is absolutely inevitable. So even the best players now in the EU in waste management, they have to make changes. So that is very clear for everybody. And there are, I mean, of course, a lot of support mechanisms that the EU provides. So we do provide mechanisms for, municipalities or local administrations to learn from best practices from other places in the EU. We support financially such exchanges of information. There's also EU funding that is available. And as I mentioned in one of my slides, we also have more formal exchanges of information with member states on what should be done, but what should be improved, how it could possibly be improved. So this is these early warning reports. So we do a lot of compliance promotion effort towards this target. I mean, we do not intend to wait doing nothing until the target date sets, and then we simply go against the member states with serious stick. The stick exists, it exists. We can take infringement measures against the member states. It is a lengthy process. It's a court process. So, and that is not our ultimate goal to punish. I mean, our ultimate goal is to ensure that there is compliance. So that most of our efforts are focused really on promoting this compliance with the open dialogue and technical and financial support to the member states.
Yeah. I have to admit, I liked the virtuous missions to the member states a lot. So Brussels people leaving their desks, going into the countries, and I had the feeling that the countries appreciated a lot the real interest for their situation. So I hope once the COVID mess is over, that you could think about to start it again. Huh?
Yes, we are we're actively waiting for the COVID to calm down, to find the solutions that we can restart this outreach. Absolutely.
Yeah. So 1.5 hours quickly went over. I would like to thank again our 3 great speakers. Please hear all the applause from the people who are there. Thanks a lot. I hope to stay in touch with all of you. See you soon again in real life, hopefully, and not just on a screen. All the best to you, and next time. By the way, next week we have a EPR webinar. For free for everybody, this time about the fees in principles, and then the complex how to eco-modulate these EPR fees, perhaps of interest for some of the people as well. So again, thanks a lot and see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.